You ever have one of those moments where you're standing in your own home, your boots on your own floor, and you realize someone else has decided they own your life more than you do? That's exactly where I found myself one summer evening, standing just inside my screen door, arms folded, watching a woman I barely knew stand in my driveway with her phone pressed to her ear, calling 911 on me. And she wasn't whispering either. No, she was declaring to the dispatcher that I was a squatter on my own ranch, and that her son deserved this land more than I ever did. Now, before I tell you how wild things got, you need to know how it all started. I had inherited this ranch outside a small town in Arizona from my uncle, a man who taught me everything about cattle, fencing, irrigation, and pride in what's yours. I'd worked my whole life in the city, but I finally decided to retire early and move out here full-time. The place was heaven: wraparound porch, a little vegetable garden, a pond I kept stocked, and the kind of quiet you don't find much anymore. For a while, life was peaceful. And then came my new neighbors. A woman named Linda and her 30-year-old son, Trevor. They moved into a house down the road, and right away, things shifted. First time I met Trevor, he was standing knee-deep in my pond, fishing like it was a public park. When I told him, politely, that this was private property, he mumbled something and sloshed out. 10 minutes later, his mom came marching down the gravel road like she owned the place, demanding to know why I was being, in her words, unneighborly. That was the first red flag. I figured it would blow over, but it didn't. Within weeks, Linda was at it again, telling me my fence was 2 feet too far west, that my barn was an eyesore, that my rooster was too loud, that the dust from my driveway was choking her allergies. And the kicker? She'd wave this little laminated HOA card around like it was a badge of authority. Thing was, my property wasn't even part of the HOA. My uncle had opted out decades ago, and I had the papers to prove it. Still, every week, there was a new complaint. I probably could have brushed it off, until the night I found Trevor inside my barn. He said he was just exploring, but let's be honest, you don't sneak into a man's barn in the dark unless you're up to something. That's when I installed cameras across the property. And thank God I did, because when Linda finally called the cops claiming I was trespassing on my own land, I had proof of every lie she'd been spinning. The night the deputies showed up, lights flashing, Linda stood there smiling like she'd already won. Her son leaned back against her car, arms crossed, looking smug. The taller officer asked me for my name, said they'd received a report that I was living on land I didn't own. I calmly handed over a thick folder, title deed, tax records, survey maps, the whole 9 yards. While the officer flipped through it, Linda shouted, "Don't let him fool you. My son is a veteran. This land was promised to us." Only problem? Trevor had never served a day in his life. Then Trevor decided to swing at an officer. One wild punch, and just like that, the whole game changed. He was cuffed and stuffed in the back of the cruiser, and Linda screamed bloody murder like they'd just arrested a saint. I remember thinking, well, that's the end of it. But I was dead wrong. That was only the opening act. The next morning, I found an official-looking letter under my gate. The HOA board, who technically had no jurisdiction, was suddenly reviewing my land. Couple days later, my irrigation system was slashed, my garden torn up with tire marks, and one of my cows let out through an open gate. And then came the night my cameras caught Trevor crawling across my yard with a wrench and a bag of nails, trying to sabotage my water system. He slipped, the alarms went off, and the deputies dragged him out of my trough soaking wet, sputtering some nonsense about checking for leaks. By now, I realized I wasn't just dealing with nosy neighbors. This was a war, and wars have fronts. On my side, I had paperwork, cameras, and one stubborn German shepherd named Max. On theirs, they had lies, manipulation, and a whole lot of nerve. That's when I called in some backup of my own. A friend of mine, Rachel, worked as a local reporter. She came out with a cameraman and filmed everything. The fake HOA badge Linda had left on my porch, the letters, the damage, even the footage of Trevor sneaking around at night. The story went live on the evening news, and suddenly, it wasn't just me versus Linda. It was me versus her, the HOA board, and half the town who'd bought into her fairy tales. And here's where it got insane. Instead of backing off, Linda doubled down. She started posting announcements claiming I was a dangerous squatter, held secret HOA meetings about reclaiming my land, and even showed up with a 20-foot moving truck. yelling through my gate that her son would be moving in by Sunday. I just laughed and waved at the security cameras because I knew every second of this circus was being recorded. But the lowest point came when I came home one night to find my front door wide open, my kitchen trashed, and my dog Max tied up in the shed, whimpering. Carved into my dining table were two words: get out. I can't even describe the rage that boiled in me right then. They weren't just trying to take my land anymore. They were trying to break me. That night, I decided I wouldn't just defend myself. I'd fight back. I gathered every testimony I could from neighbors who'd been bullied by Linda over the years. Fines for flowers by the mailbox, threats over cars parked wrong, intimidation at meetings. I built an online folder, shared it quietly, and within days, hundreds of people had seen it. Folks who'd been silent started speaking up. And that's when Linda snapped for good. She drove a moving truck straight through my gate, splintering it off the hinges, while Trevor came charging at my barn with a sledgehammer, swinging like a madman. Max barked like crazy, but I held him back, grabbed my phone, and said, "Smile, Trevor, you're live." And sure enough, when the state troopers rolled in minutes later, cameras in tow, the whole world saw Trevor smashing my tractor and Linda screaming about her land. They cuffed him on the spot. She tried to argue, finger-wagging, yelling about eco-housing projects and community vision. But the trooper just tilted his head and said, "Ma'am, we have you both on camera committing felony trespassing and property destruction. This is over." And it was, or at least that chapter was. Within a week, the county dismissed the HOA's annexation request. The board voted Linda out unanimously. I got a full protective order, and Trevor got probation, fines, and mandatory therapy. My ranch was safe again, officially exempt from HOA oversight for good. Now, don't get me wrong, rebuilding the barn and replacing the gate wasn't easy, but something about it felt cleansing. Like I'd burned out the infection and the land could breathe again. Folks started calling me a folk hero, but really, I just did what anyone would do when pushed too far. And yet, sometimes, late at night, I think back to that first evening, me standing at my own door, watching Linda call 911 on me, and I wonder how many other people out there are fighting the same kind of battle. Not just over land, but over dignity, over neighbors who mistake control for community. So let me ask you, what do you think? Was I right to fight fire with fire, to drag every ugly truth out into the light? Or should I have walked away, sold the land, let them play their little HOA games without me? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I have a feeling this is the kind of story where folks are split right down the middle. And hey, if you've ever dealt with a neighbor like Linda, you already know, sometimes the quiet ones aren't quiet because they're weak. They're quiet because they're loading ammo, waiting for the right moment to speak. And when they do, well, let's just say the whole county's gonna hear it.